Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jayakumar Christian, our next speaker. Jayakumar is a good friend, and he's been with World Vision since 1978. He's been around a long time. He has started at the grassroots, out in the projects, and risen to be national director of the largest program we have in the world in India. And, but what I love about Jayakumar is his incredible spiritual depth. For many years, we sat on a global committee together that met a couple of times a year, and often they would call on Jayakumar to bring devotions because he swims in such a deep part of the spiritual ocean. And as he would give devotions, most of the people around the table would just sit there like, man, that's deep, you know? And he's been such an inspiration to so many at World Vision. He's been an incredible leader for World Vision India. He wrote a book called God of the Empty-Handed, Poverty, Power, and the Kingdom of God. And this book is considered almost required reading for all Christian development professionals and workers. It's really the theology of working with the poor. And he's been quoted widely and globally from that book. He leads 1,800 community development workers and staff across India who work in more than 5,300 communities in that country. Jayakumar, or as we call him Jaya, earned his bachelor's degree at Madras University, master's from Madras School of Social Work, and his doctorate from the Fuller School of World Missions in California. He's also was Fuller's Alumnus of the Year in 2002. And I want to mention that he has a wife, Vidya, and two sons, Jayant, who is married to Mayuri, and Vikram. And as he says, these boys are a blessing to him. His whole family is a blessing to him. Please give a warm welcome to Jayakumar Christian.
It's such a privilege, being blessed over these last few hours. Came in last night, late last night, to be with you this morning. And it's such a privilege to be here this morning for us coming from World Vision, whichever part of the world. Your trust in us matters much. And we're grateful to God for each of you, for what you mean to the ministry of World Vision. And to be able to come here and say that personally is a very special privilege for us. And I want to thank Rich for this invitation, and I want to especially thank the many people who worked with me over this last few months to get this act together, to be sure that I am able to communicate. For World Vision India, the theme that was assigned to me was God at work in India. I thought that was just overwhelming. I became nervous after I received that mail to be able to trace God's work in India. But having said that, I must say World Vision staff anywhere in the world are in a very privileged position because God, I believe, has given us a ringside view on what God is doing in our communities, in our nations. And we see this over and over again. And I, as one representing the staff of World Vision, I want to say it is truly a privileged position. Day in and day out, we see what God is doing in our communities. And I want to speak from that perspective. As one of the other privileges of being with World Vision is our feet is on the ground and our hands are dirty. We have not outsourced our engagement with the poor to some other organization. We are there, our feet is on the ground and our hands are dirty. And from that privileged position, I want to share with you a few thoughts as to what God is doing in our communities. Let me start with Sophia. Sophia today is 18 years. I met her a year ago, and this was my first visit to this program, which is a program that served orphan and vulnerable children in Northeast India. And she came running to me all bubbly, and she said, "Uncle, do you know me?" And I said, Sophia, I said, "I don't know you." She said, "I'm Sophia, I'm your peer educator in this program." And honestly, no one had told me about her and had not introduced her to me. So we got talking about it, and she said, "I work in this community as your peer educator, and I know this about HIV and AIDS, and I say this about HIV and AIDS." And she went on, and she says, "Uncle, before you leave this place, can you please come and meet my mother? I said, yes. And after a few hours of visit in the communities, I went to see Sophia's mother. And Sophia's mother was in bed in her office room, and they were giving her some drips. She was in a lot of pain. The staff said she was going in for, she had a severe abdominal pain. They think it's a stone in the kidney, and she needs to go for surgery, but the hospital was not very willing to take her. And she then told her story. She said, Uncle, many years ago, my father died. He had a headache, and then when he died, they said he had HIV and AIDS. And my mother's got headache today. And my younger sister's HIV positive. I am not HIV positive. I take care of them. And my mother has a headache, and she is worried because my father also had a headache the day before he died. And as she is worried that she would leave behind my sister and me. So that's why she is crying. So I asked Sophia, can we pray? And I prayed, and it was a simple prayer, pleading with God, please listen to their cry, Lord, as they come to you this morning or this evening. And as we finished the prayer, it was an ordinary prayer, prayer of a sincere heart. All of us were in tears. We were crying. Sophia's mother was crying. But Sophia told, Uncle, don't cry. Jesus will heal us. Jesus will heal. This is the privileged position of World Vision. We see hope birthed almost on a daily basis in our communities. And it's such a privilege. Honestly, we don't take this lightly in World Vision. It is such a privilege to be there and say, share this with God. And as I go on, I would say, God is already there working in the lives of Sophia. And we just happen to be there reaping the benefits of it, reaping the fruit along with Sophia. And saying, God, we're truly grateful to you. This morning, I want to share with you a quick glimpse of what God is doing in our communities. India, speaking about India, it's a land of billion opportunities. This is not just simply a land with a lot of complications, a lot of challenges, many ways to describe India, but we see India as a land with billion opportunities, 1.2 billion people, with 836 million people below $2 a day. And the average age of India, it's a young nation. The average age of India is 29 years. And in this country, we have children who are bleeding. We have almost 50% of our children, the statistic is 45.9% of our children who are malnourished, who are by underweight measurements. 50% of our children are malnourished. That means what our Prime Minister calls as a national shame. For these children, it's a personal humiliation. It's not simply an impersonal national shame. This is a personal humiliation that these children would go through all their life. They would always be second class. Whether they are in school, employment, you name it, they will always be second class. Because their brain has been damaged when they were below 2 years. And forever they would be second class. A sense of deep personal humiliation. And for World Vision, these are great opportunities to be present as kingdom people among the poor. And we stand in this gap between the 1.2 billion people opportunity and the 50% malnourished children. And World Vision, God has given us this privilege to be able to stand in this gap, to be a prophetic presence in this gap between the opportunity and the challenges. God, like I said, God is already there in these communities. And for us, we see this as an opportunity to be there and say, our presence is not a pioneering presence anytime. It is simply an act of obedience. We see God already there. He is doing his work among the poor, and our act is simply an act of obedience. And I learned this when my older son was much, much younger. When he was something like 2.5 or 3 years, I was in church with him. And one evening, it was so difficult to keep him in church quiet. And I've said this several times because it brought to me a very important mission point. And I took him out to the church compound, and we were standing near the baptism pond. And that night, in the waters of the baptism pond, he could see the reflection of the moon. And he walked down with his little feet and picked up a long stick, dipped it into the waters of the pond, and stirred the moon, reflection of the moon, and looked up to see if the moon was shaking. We do this so often in missions. Instead of saying, God, what are you doing there so that we can follow you in an act of obedience, we play God in the lives of the poor. If we don't recognize that God is at work already there. World Vision staff are uniquely privileged to be simply called an obedient community. That is our best ID. We are simply an obedient people. We are not great pioneers. You might call us great things and all kinds of adjectives you might use, but we are ordinary people, clay-feeted, feeble-hand, obedient people. That's who we are. Because God is already at work. Because after all, you and I worship a God who has heard the cry of the poor and then calls Moses to join him. You and I, in many ways, in this community of faith, are simply at best an obedient people. So that the nation will come to a conclusion that these are an obedient people, we ask one more question: who is your God? For World Vision India, it's our privilege not to simply do, we have about 200 some projects, 149 area development programs. It's what doesn't wake us up in the morning in World Vision India for my 1,979 staff. What doesn't wake us up is to go and implement those projects. What wakes us up in World Vision India is that we can transform this 1.2 billion people by taking our stand among the poor, exactly like the way Jesus did. We take our stand, our feet is on the ground and our hands are dirty among the poor so that India can be transformed. That is our project. Our project is not simply to implement 200 projects. Even an average Hindu organization can do it well. You don't need kingdom people for whom their God sent their only son to die on the cross to go and implement 200 projects. No brainer. No brainer. We are about transforming the 1.2 billion people. How? Feet on the ground, hands dirty, and following a God who is already there among the poor. In World Vision India, one of our, and I keep saying this is no ordinary presence. This is not simply about doing this balancing act between evangelism and social action. Our presence among the poor is a prophetic presence among the poor that turns the world upside down. And we see this over and over again among the poor. We work with about 43,000 self-help groups. These are savings groups that we have created. 98 or 99% of them would be predominantly women. About 20 of them come together, organize their savings, and they, over time, link to banks, and 50% of them are linked to banks, and they are able to access credit from the banking institutions in many parts of our country. But one of those things we did not envisage when we worked on these self-help groups was over time, these self-help groups became breeding grounds for good leadership. So when the government of India took this position that 50% of our local government should be women, we provided the supply line. And many of our women got elected into the government. And I was with 62 of them who got elected to the local government. And they told me just a few months ago, a few years ago, the only thing we knew was a kitchen. And over time, we became leaders in our community. Today, I'm the president of our local government. So I asked them this very famous question, so how is your husband handling this? And they said, oh, many years ago when we came in, my husband, when they called us for these small self-help group meetings, my husband was very upset. He would say, your place is in the kitchen. You need to cook. Make sure food is ready when we all come back home. And from there, today my husband comes and drops me for meetings. He's the one who brings me to meetings. And many of these women who are getting elected to these self-help governments are people who have accepted Jesus Christ or are responsive to the gospel. A godly leadership is emerging, bottom up. We are turning the world upside down. 2 years ago, we had this campaign of getting children to say that the rights of children should have a prominent place in the curriculums of our school. So we got, World Vision India serves about 2.5 million children in our country in these 5,300 communities. And we got our children to send a postcard to the chair of the National Commission on the Rights of Children, Mrs. Sinha. And we sent about 30,000 postcards. And knowing Indian bureaucracy, every mail that comes into the government office must be registered in a register. So they had to register the 30,000 postcards. And Mrs. Sinha called our advocacy person and said, please, can you ask your children to stop sending postcards? And I met her 2 months ago, and I was talking to Mrs. Sinha. She says, oh, those postcards are dangerous. I said, what did you do with them? He says, I've changed the curriculum in our schools to include a chapter on the National Commission on the rights of children. 30,000 children turning the world upside down. We are in the business of transforming India, not simply implementing 200-some projects. I write to the Prime Minister every now and then, drawing his attention to the moral responsibility of our nation, even as our nation seeks to sit in the Security Council. I write to our Prime Minister, every year, Prime Minister, 1.5 million children die in our country because of malnutrition, avoidable deaths. How can you go sit in the Security Council with good conscience? So we write to the Prime Minister, and recently we received a reply from the Prime Minister on one of the issues we raised. And he very promptly sent it to the ministry saying, pay attention to this mail. We are in a position to transform a nation. The devil will cheat us to believing we are about implementing projects. We need to be very, very careful that we don't fall to that bluff. We have a presence in the country. We have a pan-India presence in the country, present in about 5,300 communities. And one of the strengths of World Vision India is to be present among the poor 24 hours, 7 days. Our staff live in the community because we believe in transformation there is more to be caught than to be taught. And it was a simple decision to say, okay, go live in communities. And over time, what we had to do was to transform our HR policy to be incarnation friendly. We had to transform our understanding of leadership to move from a geographical understanding of incarnation to a lifestyle understanding of incarnation. Simply believing to give up what rightfully belongs to you as the operational definition of incarnation. And this is becoming a leadership culture in World Vision India. That if we want our staff to go live among the poor, the leaders need to know how to give up what rightfully belongs to us, what we think rightfully belongs to us. Because transformation of the poor is an issue of power. We cannot operate from a position of power to transform the poor. We need to choose to be powerless. And that is the strength of World Vision. Because we are where it hurts most. We are not where success is most assured. We are where actually failure is most assured. That is why we are there in World Vision. We are there because we want to be where it hurts. Not to be able to report successes. Invariably, most of the time, no one day in my life is the same. It's either challenges or opportunities, and sometimes as it's the habit of opportunities and challenges, they tend to come together. Because we are in the most difficult places where it hurts. We call it the high child vulnerable districts. Forgotten. Most government officials don't even know that village exists. But World Vision is there. And many of my staff, because of this incarnational presence, don't have a church to go to. And sometimes when they go to the church, only then it becomes a church. Monday to Saturday, Friday, they are sitting in staff devotions. On Sunday, when they come together, it becomes church. That is the place, that is where we incarnate. And because we incarnate, it is a dangerous presence among the poor. Our accountability is not simply defined in terms of financial statements and our bottom lines. Our accountability is defined in terms of we put our life at stake. And when the poor do not like it, or our detractors do not like it, they know who to attack. And my staff, every now and then, they receive phone calls which say, I know where your child goes to school. Be careful. I know where your child goes to school. That is accountability. We are in the business of redefining accountability, not settle down to simply bottom lines and good statements. We put our life there and say, okay, we mean business. We will not run away. And we have seen this over and over again. Because of our accountability, it's the poor who come around us and protect us when the detractors try to hurt us. Let me move on. I'm running out of time. Very quickly, this is our presence all over the country. Because of our pan-India presence, we are out there to be able to influence the government and the policy makers. And because of World Vision's grassroots presence, we are stronger in policy, influencing policy execution as compared to policy formulation. We are holding the governments accountable where we work. Another big thing that has happened more recently is to be able to come alongside the church. And I'm grateful to World Vision US for your trust in us. Over the years, we've kind of defined church engagement as meeting with the bishops and the heads of churches. More recently, we said that is not enough. We need to take what God has blessed us in terms of competencies, knowledge, and experience and make it available to the local church. So we walk with the local church in many, many ways. And our standard is when the poor consider the local church as good neighbors, we have done our task. So we call it the Good Neighbor Church. And it's a great contribution from World Vision US. Tori and others, we walk with them on this to be able to influence and make available to the local church all the competencies that God has blessed World Vision with. We have produced sermon notes so that the pastors can speak from it. Most churches don't speak about the poor, and it's so understandable in India because the church is a minority. We are only 2.74% in this population. We suffer from a severe inferiority minority complex. Because for us to exist is a survival issue. It's not a question of thriving, it's a question of surviving. And in that context, to be able to come alongside the church and say, talk about the poor outside the church. And then we offer workshops to the churches on integral mission to be able to equip the church on how to serve the poor and be good neighbors to the church. And then we influence young people. We offer summer programs for young people to come within the country, for them to come and live and work among the poor. Perhaps their vocation choices would be influenced because of that engagement. We work with several mission agencies over the years to be able to influence their policies, to be able to influence their policies so that their engagement with local church in many ways is in sync with this idea of making churches become good neighbors to the poor. India is a paradox. Like I said, it's a nation with billion opportunities and equally another billion challenges or more. So it is our goal in many ways, like I said, to transform the 1.2 billion people. India has 836 million people living below $2 a day. On the other hand, we are the third largest economy in the world. The top 100 rich persons, there is no percentage, rich individuals own 25% of India's GDP, while we have 78 million homeless, 11 million street children, and 12 million child laborers. This is India. Somehow our religious philosophy allows these to coexist. Our religious philosophy has space for this contradiction. 212 million children hungry. 46% of our children are malnourished. Food surplus, we have 50% of our children are malnourished. We have 3 times the buffer stock required to feed one India. Some huge disconnect. World Vision stands in that gap to be able to challenge the establishment. And so our commitment is to transform a nation. Our commitment is to not make World Vision known. World Vision will only be the second question. The first question is there space in the living room of our middle class homes to talk about the poor and poverty? To be able to create that space. And then World Vision becomes the second question. Who is your preferred partner? If we get that reversed, we have a major problem. We want space in the middle-class homes, not to simply watch TV and talk about who loves Raymond and everything else, you know. But to be able to talk about the poor who are hurting in our nation. Same colored blood. Just happened to choose the wrong parents. Just happened to choose the wrong parents. World Vision is there in that place. Every middle-class home, space for discussing the issues of poor and vulnerable. Our goal is to transform a nation, not simply to implement projects. So, World Vision India is actively engaged in challenging the millions in India who are the middle class and the rich in our nation to be able to consider the poor. Our goal by 2014, it is our goal to be able to engage 10 million Indians. As of now, we have engaged about 3.6 million Indians who are engaged in some form or the other with World Vision. And we're grateful to World Vision US, World Vision Canada, and others who have invested much made seed investments in World Vision India to be able to challenge India. And then our goal in 2014 is to be able to have 120,000 sponsors. As of now, we have about 55,000 sponsors in the country. And we are growing. And God has opened great doors for us to be able to move into this place and influence the nation. And not just the middle class, but also our power holders. We are in the business of transforming the 1.2 billion people, one child at a time. We value your prayers. I'm finished within time. A few years ago, World Vision was working in this community in North India. When I was based in Delhi, we were working in this part of the country. We have quite a few fundamentalist friends from the Hindu fundamentalist groups who are good friends with World Vision. And as part of our community organization, we formed a community-based organization or village development committee in this place. And the president of that village development committee happened to be a strong Hindu fundamentalist. And when his state president knew that one of his members works with a Christian organization, he was very worried. So he came over to his village and searched for his member and went and asked him, "Is this what I hear? Is it true?" He says, "What is it?" He said, "I understand you're working with very closely with World Vision." He says, "Yes, we work very closely with World Vision." He says, "Do you know they are a Christian organization?" He said, "Yes, I know they are a Christian organization." He says, "Do you know these Christians, today they will give you well and clinic and roads, and tomorrow they will want you to become a Christian." And our friend in the village said, "If you look at their lives, you will also want to follow their God." And over time, and 2 weeks ago, I met another man, he's now an elderly person, in a place where we started with no church. And today there are 7 churches in that place. And he came to me to just talk about his churches. When I first met him, he said, "You dare not come into my community." And those days when I was a village worker, I used to cycle to these villages. And this was one of the first encounters that I had. He says, "You dare not come into my village." Today he is the pastor of the church. He's a pastor of church. Just being where God is working is such a privilege. It is honestly a privilege of World Vision. We are a very privileged people in the committee of missions and the various, compared to other organizations. God has given us a very special, privileged place. And I'm grateful to God for your trust in us. Thank you.
I warned you. That was amazing, Jaya. You know, it's amazing the way we think about the world and to realize there are more people in extreme poverty in India than all 54 countries of Africa combined. But that's not the way we think because of the size of India. And so the presence that World Vision has there has been just a tremendous thing. And You know, how about these one-liners? We are a dangerous presence among the poor. Christianity is better caught than taught. We're trying to make good neighbor churches in India. We're trying to do that in the U.S. as well, Jaya.